Coming up on Lawmakers. The Senate mourns the loss of two of their own, Secretary of the Senate Frank Eldridge and former Senator Rene Kemp. The House votes to create Maddie's Call, a network to alert law enforcement when disabled adults go missing. And a look at the meth problem in Georgia and what the state is doing about it. Those stories and more are coming up next.
This is Lawmakers, your source for all the news from under the Gold Dome. Here are your anchors, Gerald Bryant and Nwandi Lawson.
Good evening, everyone. Also on Lawmakers, Georgia paid tribute to Coretta Scott King Saturday at the Capitol. We'll show you part of those ceremonies.
And the constitutionality of the Ten Commandments bill passed by the House last week is called into question. But first, our lead story tonight, the legislature mourns the loss of two of their own. Today was a solemn day for members of the state Senate. Former Senators Frank Eldridge and Rene Kemp both passed away this weekend. Eldridge also served as Secretary of the Senate up to the day he died. Lawmakers Jesse Freeman got reaction from senators this morning before they left for Mr. Eldridge's funeral, and Jesse is standing by with more.
Well, Gerald, a bus left for former Senator Frank Eldridge's funeral in Waycross today about 10:30 a.m. Before it left, I asked some of the senators how they will remember Eldridge and former Senator Rene Kemp. Frank Eldridge served the state for decades as a state senator and later as Secretary of the Senate.
We were all shocked to hear that he had died unexpectedly during Friday night. Glad that he died peacefully, glad that we had a successful Friday, last Friday with him, and are all sending our prayers and condolences to his family.
We lost an institution over the weekend. Every member of the Senate knows how important Frank Eldridge is and was to our work here.
He knew so much. He knew all the rules, and he was just always so kind to me all the time and to everybody. He never changed. Whether he was having a good day or a bad day, you didn't know it. It's going to be a big boy in the Senate, and it's just really not going to be the same.
Well, Frank Eldridge was like a father figure to a lot of the senators, and especially the new ones as they came in. He told me many things to expect, and one thing he told me was that the friends that you make in the state Senate would be friends for life, and he was right.
Well, Frank was just wonderful. He made every senator feel like that they were the most important person in the world, and whatever they needed, he was there. And he backed it up because he really did feel that way. But
Frank was just a prince of a man. He was a nonpartisan. He helped me when I'm the majority leader. He helped the Democrats when they were in control. He was just not a partisan, just willing to help any senator get their sea legs when they came to the Capitol, and then anything he could do for you personally or in terms of learning the rules of the Senate. He was just perfect for the job he had.
Frank had, of course, been around state government for years and years and years, and he knew all the characters and could tell you stories about how the power in the state shifted.
Former State Senator Rene Kemp also passed this weekend. Kemp was a former Judiciary Committee chairman and a tireless advocate for mental health issues.
Rene was in some ways like Frank. He was just a guy that everybody liked, and it didn't matter what kind of fights you had on the floor about legislation. He walked out and he was still your best buddy.
Rene was my seatmate when he was serving in the Senate, and he kept me laughing all the time. He was just a good sport. And when he got sick, he says, "Girl, I'm so sick, and I'm going to miss Rene." I've kept up with him since he was out of the Senate, and it's just sad.
Rene Kemp was a true statesman as well as Frank Eldridge, and both of them served well in this body. Of course, Senator Kemp served as a Judiciary Chairman at one time and did an outstanding job. And when the Democrats were in charge or in power and he was the chairman, he was very kind to the other side or to the other side of the aisle, and I experienced that with him.
Senator Kemp was a personal friend of mine, a person that was really an inspiration to me because of the passion that he had for people. His heart was as big as this building. for the least of these, he was always a spokesman. He was always concerned about those folks that were down on their luck.
Funeral services for Senator Kemp will be held Saturday at the First Baptist Church of Hinesville. He will be laid to rest in Swainsboro, Georgia at the family gravesite. Reporting live, I'm Jesse Freeman for Lawmakers.
Jesse, they were both fine gentlemen and will be missed. Thanks for the report.
Well, the House also took time to honor the memory of Frank Eldridge with tributes from two representatives who began their legislative careers in the Senate the year Eldridge became Secretary.
I can truly say I don't know anyone who loved the Senate, this legislature, or this state any more than Frank Eldridge. He was a true servant. He enjoyed serving those who served others, and he did such a wonderful, wonderful job.
The most important lesson might be is it matters how you treat people. And Frank Eldridge was one of those gentlemen, in the truest sense of the word, that no matter how complicated the issue might be, no matter how trivial the issue might be, no matter how much heat there was on the issue or how much kindness and goodness there was to the issue, he treated everyone with equality and love and kindness. He carried out that part of the scripture that says you must do justice, you must love kindness, and you must walk humbly.
Funeral services for Mrs. Coretta Scott King will be tomorrow at the new Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Lithonia. Saturday, Mrs. King's body lay in state at the Capitol Rotunda. Family members joined thousands of mourners as they paid their respects.
On behalf of Georgians, all Georgians, Mary and I extend our deepest condolences to the King family and especially to Dr. and Ms. King's children. And we welcome all of the mourners who have come here today to pay their final respects to one of Georgia's most beloved citizens. And as a token of the great respect for Mrs. King's lives and accomplishments, I would like to present the family with the official declaration commemorating the life of Mrs. Coretta Scott King.
Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine, heir of salvation, purchased of God, born of His Spirit, washed in His blood.
Mrs. King will lie in honor for public viewing until midnight tonight at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was pastor. Well, in other news, the House today approved an alert system for disabled adults who may wander away from their caregivers. House Bill 728, the Maddie's Call law, was inspired by the case of Maddie Moore, an elderly Alzheimer's patient who wandered away from her Atlanta home and was later found dead. Bill sponsor Representative Bobby Franklin explained how the alert system could have saved her life.
In our state, it normally takes between 24 and 48 hours to energize law enforcement when an adult goes missing. 24 hours can be the difference between life and death for someone with a mental impairment. And what we're hoping to accomplish with House Bill 728, the Maddie's Call Act, is to enable us to put in place a system where law enforcement can get right on it and start looking for these disabled adults.
Representative Sheila Jones says that since 1994, when the city of Atlanta passed a similar measure, 11 calls have resulted in the return of disabled adults to their caregivers. Cities have the option, House Bill passed by a vote of 147 to 3, and it now goes to the Senate. Well, in other news, I think we're going to move on to the constitutional law. A constitutional law expert who helped to craft the legislation allowing for the posting of the 10 Commandments is advising that that bill is now unconstitutional. Last Wednesday, the House passed House Bill 941, allowing public posting of the 10 Commandments and other historical documents, and requiring that court challenges to the law be defended by the state attorney general. On Friday, House Speaker Glenn Richardson told reporters that he crafted the legislation 2 years ago with the assistance of the Georgia constitutional scholar Lynn Hogue.
He believes that we cannot deny the historical significance of religion in the formation of the state and nation and in those historical documents. And when you display those in that context, historically, the 10 Commandments, the Mayflower Compact, and the Declaration of Independence, you can talk about religion and how it helped us form this state in this country. And he believes it withstands constitutional muster.
Today, Speaker Richardson received a letter from Professor Hogue indicating a change in his position. Quote, "I want to advise you that my legal opinion on the constitutionality of the proposed Georgia legislation on the posting of the 10 Commandments has changed, and that I do not believe that the legislation is constitutional in view of the 2 rulings by the federal Supreme Court in 10 Commandments cases in the summer of 2005. Hogue goes on to outline 3 problems with the proposed legislation. It is unconstitutional in his view. The requirement that the state attorney general defend challenges to the law effectively transfers state money to the ACLU or other defending attorneys, and the public posting of the 10 Commandments is inherently sectarian." Not all constitutional experts agree with Professor Hogue's assessment. Dan Coonan from the University of Georgia believes that the recent appointment of 2 conservative justices could swing future Supreme Court rulings to favor the posting of the 10 Commandments. House Bill 941 is currently going through the Senate committee process.
Governor Sonny Perdue has placed 2 items in his budget to help deal with Georgia's growing methamphetamine problem. One allocates $1 million towards operating a 14-man GBI meth task force. The other would add about 200 beds for publicly funded treatment. David Zelski joins us live with more on meth issues facing Georgia. David.
Well, Gerald, as you know, Georgia Public Broadcasting has been covering Georgia's growing meth problem over the past 2 years. And on Tuesday, February 14th at 9 o'clock, we dedicate 2 hours of programming to better inform Georgians about what is happening and more so what's being done to fight the problem. Here's a quick preview of the documentary called The Georgia Meth Invasion. Georgia is under attack.
The paranoia that sets in with methamphetamine is nothing like I've ever seen, and it results in violence that is just unbelievable.
If you have a meth lab in your area, you're sitting on a bomb.
Rapidly, it has come across in just a few years from California to downtown Douglas County, Georgia.
Drug wars have been going on for years, but a type of the drug methamphetamine known as ice is the latest and most deadly weapon to date.
I knew that I was in trouble from the very first time.
Nothing mattered to me anymore. I did not care if I lived or died.
I started staying from place to place, staying up 9 and 10 days at a time.
It is 10 times more powerful than cocaine. The base form of it, real ice, is 10 times more powerful than crack.
It's so cheap, it is eventually, give it 10 years from now, and I'm telling you, everybody that's dealing cocaine is going to be pushed out of the way. It ain't even hit big here.
When I said, I have ice, I was just like, oh, whoa, I can't do that. I prayed while I was in the shower the whole time, please just let him forget that I even said that. But he didn't forget.
Ashley Smith has managed to stay away from methamphetamine ever since her lengthy encounter with accused Fulton County courthouse shooter Brian Nichols, the Atlanta man charged with murdering 4 people on March 11, 2005, a day that captured the nation's attention. And as Ashley explains in her book, Unlikely Angel, it changed her entire outlook on life.
I think I lost myself. Meth took my daughter away from me. Meth made my family uninvite me to Christmas one year because they didn't want to be around me. I just received a letter from a girl yesterday who said she's worshiping drugs. Her husband was killed the same way my husband was killed. She has 3 kids, and she's a Christian too, and it just takes a hold, You have to be willing to want to change and realize that your life has gotten so bad.
Now, Frontline's national special begins at 9 o'clock on February 14th. GPB's Georgia Meth Invasion follows from 10 to 11 o'clock. A live hotline will be available all 2 hours for viewers to call with questions or concerns. Reporting live, I'm David Zelski for Lawmakers.
Thanks for that report, David. Well, the House today decided that a proposal to increase municipal fines for the first time in 30 years needs more study before coming to a vote. Representative Edward Lindsey explained that the increase from $1,000 to $2,500 would be a greater deterrent to those who violate business ordinances. But many, including Representative Dan Lackley, wondered why this couldn't be a local decision.
One of the problems that a lot of local governments are having to address in dealing with trying to regulate industries is that with a maximum fine of only $1,000, a lot of times the cities are only given two options. One is to impose either the maximum fine, which will be a slap on the business's wrist, or imposing a death penalty and in effect revoking the license that these businesses are operating under. So this gives those cities greater flexibility, that's all.
We have jails that are overflowing from folks that can't make bail. And when they do make bail, they're paying exorbitant fees and high bail. And now we come down here, and we're going to go from $1,000 to $2,500, and it's going to sail right on through. I can't sit there in good conscience. I can't sit in my seat and see something like that happen. I'm glad that a few folks have spoken up. There are so many questions on this bill that this bill needs to go back to committee.
The House decided to send House Bill 719 back to committee. The House also decided to clear up a conflict in how hospital records are obtained in civil suits. Representative Barry Fleming explained House Bill 912.
What I did is I asked the Georgia Hospital Association and also the Georgia Trial Lawyers Association to get together and see if they could come to a compromise to work on this solution so that it would be a uniform way to obtain hospital records, which was reasonable and cost effective. They did that and came together on an agreement, and that's the bill that you have in front of you today. Basically, we're going to take the law back to the way it was prior to the court case that changed it, and say that now not only do you have 10 days, but you have 20 days if you're a patient and wouldn't like for your hospital records, or you have an objection to the release of your hospital records after notification of you and or your attorney.
House Bill 912 passed without dissent and moves to the Senate. In other House news, members of the Legislative Women's Caucus today introduced a resolution to memorialize Coretta Scott King.
We are asking that you support us on naming April 27th as on her birthday and recognizing her each year for her birthday. We are also in this bill asking that Mrs. King's portrait be allowed to hang in the Capitol next to her husband, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Well, for those of you with access to the internet, you can watch Lawmakers online. Visit our website at gpb.org for more information. Click on Watch Online, then follow the instructions for watching live or looking at past Lawmakers programs in our archives. That website address again is gpb.org. Just another way we keep you apprised of what's going on here at the General Assembly.
And we'd like to recommend another website that's a valuable resource for information about the Georgia General Assembly. Go to www.legis.state.ga.us. That's a website that's a great research tool we at Lawmakers use on a regular basis. Well, last week was another busy week in the Georgia General Assembly. The House passed the 2006 supplemental budget, and Governor Perdue's Hope Chest amendments stalled in the Senate and the House. Lawmakers David Zelski gives us a look at what happened last week in the Georgia General Assembly.
Before any bills were taken up last week, Georgians mourned the loss of Coretta Scott King, widow of civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
We're also proud that a son of this soil led a nonviolent revolution that brought justice, dignity, and greater integrity to our democracy.
This morning as I come to you, colleagues, I just want to say that this is a woman who certainly in her own right will be placed on the same mantle with her husband in terms of her global impact.
For decades, she proudly bore the torch of her husband's legacy. Now, she has passed that torch on to a new generation.
Later on Tuesday afternoon, the House approved a Senate measure to divide Athens-Clarke County into 2 Senate districts.
Clarke County with its 2001 population of over 101,000, plus the University of Georgia with its 33,000 to 35,000 students, plus all of its extension and outreach programs all over the state, needs to have more representation in the Senate chamber than just one voice.
Voters who won't forget. And I'm sure a lot of you have made your minds up about this piece of legislation. I'm sure you have. You know the way you're going to vote. But ultimately, the voters of whatever district they're put in will have the last say.
On Wednesday, the House passed a bill that would allow local municipalities to post the Ten Commandments and other historical documents in public buildings.
About 3+ years ago, a lifelong resident of Barrow County hung a display of a simple document of the Ten Commandments in our courthouse. It was the copy of the Ten Commandments that day set forth and set in motion a series of events that would forever change my county.
We've been down here about 10 days, I guess, Mr. Speaker. And somehow, some way, I'm a lot more concerned about academic achievement. I'm a lot more concerned about the dropout rate. I'm a lot more concerned about all those people on waiting lists for services than where we hang the Ten Commandments.
Also on Wednesday, 1 week after the governor signed a bill to cut natural gas tax in half, the Democrats released a plan to re-regulate natural gas.
Prior to deregulation, Georgia had the third lowest gas prices for their consumers in the country. A couple years after deregulation, Georgia has the third highest in the country.
Thursday was a busy day in both the House and the Senate. The House passed a bill that increases penalties for sexual offenders.
In Georgia, we believe that this is a very serious, heinous type of criminal conduct that we simply want to be very tough on.
This bill is actually going to discourage families from reporting sexual abuse within their families because they don't want to see their children going to prison for 25 years.
Meanwhile, the Senate got into a heated debate of the governor's plan to preserve hope, the Hope Chest Amendment.
To allow future cuts to the Hope Scholarship, 32 in favor of future cuts to the Hope Scholarship, 23 against.
Is to ensure the longevity of these programs. This legislation does just that.
Both Democrats and Republicans claim the other side voted the way they did for political reasons, and debate was at times heated.
We've got a rule in our rule book that says amendments will be allowed on the floor. If it's only to take place in the committee, tear these pages out. Tear this in half.
Chair recognizes Assembly 13th to speak to the governor's hopeless amendment.
We don't need this. We don't need this rule. I can't tear it in half, Mr. President. We don't need this thing, man. Y'all not only have changed them, you've destroyed them.
The Dems in past history have spent money outside from many projects down in the Albany area and across the state on projects that were not related to education even.
For the governor to say that he is protecting hope, in my mind, is like the rooster taking credit for the sun coming up.
Due to all the raids and the politicization of hope, it was at risk of going bankrupt in 3 years. So we went through a process to save hope, to secure it, and now we're coming forward with a constitutional amendment to lock it in.
Senate Resolution 655 failed to garner the 2/3 majority vote and did not pass. However, on Friday, the Senate voted to reconsider the Hope Chest Amendment, so it now goes back to the Senate Rules Committee. Also on Friday, the House passed the 2006 supplemental budget.
Legislative intent is outlined, which we think is better for this body, for the General Assembly, to ensure that what we pass is followed through after we're gone.
House Bill 1026, the mid-year budget, passed and now goes to the Senate. And that's a look at what happened last week in the Georgia General Assembly. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm David Zelski.
Representatives Stephanie Stuckey-Benefield and Abel Mabel Thomas held a meeting today to promote a resolution to examine the possibility of licensing direct entry midwives. A direct entry midwife, also known as a lay midwife, does not have a nursing degree but completes coursework and an apprenticeship under senior midwives.
We're calling for a study committee, and simply we just want the issue to be studied further. We want to bring in experts from around the state and maybe look at other states. There are 24 states that have licensed midwives for home birth.
I had a doctor that recognized the need of my husband being there. Took me 23-hour delivery. I did it naturally, no rushing. It was the best experience I had in my life. It was how birth should be.
Representatives Benfield and Thomas say they are working to reduce the infant mortality rate in Georgia. Supporters feel that the licensing of direct entry midwives would be especially beneficial to rural Georgians.
When I looked at the statistics of how high infant mortality was in the state of Georgia, we thought that there had to be a direct correlation, or at least we want to see if there's a direct correlation from reducing infant mortality, because there are so many areas in the state of Georgia, specifically in rural areas, where you don't have hospitals at the level where you can get to them readily, and women don't get a chance to get good prenatal care in those areas, and even in the urban areas, because of some social economic risk as well that are involved.
Currently, certified nurse midwives practice in Georgia hospitals. Supporters of this resolution are working to license direct entry midwives so that they can legally perform home births and work in freestanding birth centers.
And statewide, homeschool participants celebrated Home Education Day at the Capitol this morning. Lawmakers Katie Eubanks has our story.
At Home Education Day at the Capitol, representatives from a number of home education organizations, along with students and parents who homeschool, enjoyed touring the Capitol and meeting with their legislators while raising awareness about home education in Georgia. Representing the Georgia Home Education Association, Johnny Peak explains the goals of Home Education Day at the Capitol.
To have a voice, have audience, and speak with our local representatives.
Mike Olson of AIR, Home Education Information Resource, comments on the state of home education in Georgia, particularly the freedom of parents to choose how to educate their children.
It's a positive thing for parents in that all parents have the right to make that choice, and we defend that right.
Home Education Day at the Capitol culminated with a performance by the Joyful Noise Homeschool Band, which features students from over 100 homeschool families. Organizers say that they plan on making Home Education Day at the Capitol an annual event to ensure that home educators' voices are heard. Reporting for Lawmakers, I'm Katie Eubanks.
Lawmakers will not be seen tomorrow night because the Georgia General Assembly will be in recess. Coming up Wednesday, the House and Senate will convene in a special joint session to hear an address from Major General William G. Webster, Jr., the commanding General of the 3rd Infantry Division in Iraq. We'll have highlights of that message and all the latest from under the Gold Dome Wednesday night at 7. If you missed any part of this Lawmakers broadcast, tune in tomorrow morning when Lawmakers repeats at 5:30 a.m. Now stay tuned for Tavis Smiley's conversation with Coretta Scott King. That's coming up next here on GPV.
That's our broadcast for this, the 14th legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Gerald Bryant.
And I'm Wandy Lawson. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a good evening.
This has been a production of Georgia Public Broadcasting.